Good morning, you're watching Daybreak, and I'm your host, Nadia Jani, taking you through the day's top stories. Here are the headlines. Trump threatens Iran with something very tough if US demands are not met. At least 10 dead in mass shooting at school and home in Canada, authorities say. And US Vice President J.D. Vance and Azerbaijan President Ilham Aliyev signed strategic partnership during his visit to the South Caucasus. To our top story this morning, the US and Iran have begun to enter a new phase in their diplomatic relationship, resuming nuclear talks on Friday after nearly 8 months of suspension. However, President Donald Trump has warned that failure to reach a deal could lead to tough military action.
A second American aircraft carrier strike group could be sent to the Middle East for possible military action against Iran if negotiations fail. That's according to US President Donald Trump on Tuesday. In an interview with Axios, Trump explained that either the US would make a deal with Iran or it would have to take tougher action, similar to last year's 12-day war in June. This threat follows talks between the US and Iran on Tehran's nuclear program last Friday in Oman. However, Trump also said in an interview with Fox on Tuesday that he thinks that Iran wants to make a deal with the US on its nuclear and ballistic missile programs, but reiterated it would be foolish if they did not. Meanwhile, Iran maintains a positive diplomatic stance. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Baghaei says that the nuclear talks had shown enough consensus to continue the diplomatic process.
The Muscat meeting, which was not a long session, was in fact a half-day meeting. From our perspective, it was aimed at assessing the seriousness of the other side and the potential course of the process. Accordingly, this meeting generally focused more on the broader picture.
Meanwhile, Iran's top security official, Ali Larijani, held talks in Oman on Tuesday, days after the first round.
From the beginning, we believe that war does not resolve matters between the two countries, and the regional disputes between Iran and the West must be resolved through dialogue. It was a mistake on the part of others to believe that they could resolve issues through the language of force. This was a negative point and led to many problems in the dialogue. We believe that the many problems in the region must be resolved through dialogue between both sides.
Larijani's visit to Oman comes as Iran and the US prepare for the next round of nuclear negotiations. Tehran has said it has halted enrichment activity since the strikes on facilities last year, and always said its nuclear program is solely for peaceful purposes.
Now let's take a look at the stories shaping the day across the globe, and we go first to the headline and the first report on Al Jazeera's website. Trump threatens Iran with something very tough if US demands are not met. And as you just would have seen in our top report, that Trump has threatened Iran with possible military attacks on issues ranging from nuclear enrichment is what he's currently kind of having to make a deal with, to ballistic missiles. In comments to an Israeli outlet, he hinted at aggressive actions if no deal together with Iran comes to fruition. Some reports are saying that Trump is also thinking about sending a second aircraft to the Middle East. However, critics fear such an attack could destabilize the region. Now, just to bring you up with a reminder as to why Trump is actually taking such a hard stance. So since January, Trump has heightened US pressure on Iran after a wave of anti-government protests began in January. If you remember, we had a number of casualties and people that died during that time. Trump has warned that his country's military is locked and loaded and ready to go. is what he said during those particular protests in Iran. Trump has also compared Iran's situation with that of Venezuela and said that he's happy to basically go in and do exactly the same thing he did in January when he captured Maduro and his wife. Late last month, the Trump administration also issued Iran 3 overarching demands, saying that they needed to end Iran's uranium enrichment, a requirement to sever ties with regional proxies and limits on the country's ballistic missile stockpiles, a goal long sought by Israel as well. And just on that, Israel Prime Minister will be visiting Trump later today to discuss the situation of Iran and its nuclear program. Okay, now we're going to go to our next headline, and that is currently on the Guardian website, and that is Indonesia prepares to send up to 8,000 troops to Gaza as part of a Trump plan. Now, in this particular one, we know that this is part of peacekeeping force under Donald Trump's Middle East plan. Indonesia is actually the first country to deliver a specific commitment to the international stabilization force envisaged as part of the second phase of the Trump plan. Indonesia's president has agreed to join also the Board of Peace, which is actually expected to meet next Thursday when more information will be sent. But what we do know is that 8,000 are currently in preparation to be sent, and training has already taken place in regards to this under Donald Trump's plan for the Middle East. Okay, and now we'll go to our next headline, which is currently on CNN's website and broke. Okay, no, it's JD Vance in Azerbaijan. So we'll go to the A News website, which we know that JD Vance visited Azerbaijan and Armenia over the past 2 days in regards to the peace deal that was signed last August, on the 8th of August. And it's to create prosperity where there was only fighting and conflict. And just to keep you up to speed, there was talks and obviously in regards to a number of different items on the list. But the main thing was that a signing ceremony was held in Baku for the Charter Strategic Partnership between this government and the US. Now, during this time, President Ilham Aliyev said that they have entered a absolutely new phase with the US, saying that this is a great time for both countries to align their strategic mandates. As you can see there, this video shows them both signing the charter and what that means in regards to that. And what just to actually re-emphasize what that means, the charter is broadening of bilateral relations, expanding cooperation beyond traditional energy ties into connectivity, technology, security, investment, and long-term institutional engagement. And what President Aliyev said there, he said, will another contribution to peace, development, and cooperation will be now given to this region via the TRIP project. He said, in other words, today's visit of Vice President JD Vance can be called historical from the point of view of the substance of negotiations and the strategic charter which has been signed by both of them. So we'll definitely keep you updated in regards to all of that between the two. Okay, now we go to our next story. And that is actually leading on CNN's website. This broke roughly 2 hours ago, and at least 9 have died in a mass shooting at a school and home in Canada, police say. Now, what we also know is that the suspected shooter has also died, bringing that number to 10 in total. So it was done at a high school in the Canadian province of the British Columbia area, police said on Tuesday. Now, police responded to reports of an active shooter at the Tumbler Ridge Secondary School. This picture shows some of that of what you can see on screen right now, and it happened around 1:20 in the afternoon on Tuesday. Another person died while being transported to a hospital as well, and the suspected shooter was also found dead with what appears to be self-inflicted injuries, according to the statement from police. Now, 2 victims have been airlifted to hospital with serious life-threatening injuries. Now, in this particular photo, you can see the region. I'm not sure whether or not, if you scroll a bit down, there's this video, and then there's another one of a map showing the Tumbler Ridge area. It's a rural town of about 2,400 people at the base of its Rocky Mountains in Western Canada, about 680 kilometers from the US border. Now, mass shootings are very rare in Canada because they have much stricter gun laws than the US, but police have said that they don't believe there is an ongoing threat to the public. As you can see that map just coming up on your screen there, showing exactly where that was, and that's the Tumbler Ridge Secondary School, which has around 175 students from grades 7 to 12, according to the province website. Police are now investigating what led to the shooting and whether or not that death toll might actually increase. Okay. Those were your global headlines. We're now going to go to a short break. When I return, I'll give you an update on the rest of the global stories this morning. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's have a look at the global stories. And we stay in Canada, and at least 10 people, including the suspect, have been killed after a shooting in a school in the town of Tumbler Ridge in the western province of British Columbia. 6 people were found dead inside the secondary school. 2 more were found dead at a residence believed to be connected to the incident, and another person died on the way to the hospital. Police say the suspected shooter, a woman, was found dead inside the school from a self-inflicted injury. More than 25 people were injured in total, 2 with serious or life-threatening injuries. Authorities say investigators have identified the shooter but not releasing the name, and that the suspect's motives remains unclear. Following threats by US President Donald Trump to bar the opening of a bridge connecting Canada with the United States, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says the issue will be resolved after a phone call with Trump. Here's more on that.
US President Donald Trump talked with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney on the phone on Tuesday after Trump threatened to bar the new $4.7 billion bridge connecting Detroit and Windsor from opening. The Gordie Howe International Bridge links the Canadian province of Ontario with the US state of Michigan and was financed by Canada. But Trump argues the project unfairly favours Canada, saying US companies and materials played only a limited role in its construction, while Canada is expected to benefit significantly from American trade traffic.
I think the president was very clear and direct in his truth, John, but just to reiterate, the fact that Canada will control what crosses the Gordie Howe Bridge and owns the land on both sides is unacceptable to the president. It's also unacceptable that more of this bridge isn't being built with more American-made materials, even more so than what President Barack Obama committed to with the Canadians at the time, at the start of the project. He also believes that the U.S. should own at least half of the bridge, have shared authority over what passes across it, and participate in the economic benefits generated by its use.
The US president also tied the dispute to broader trade tensions, including Canadian tariffs on US dairy products and Canada's recent trade engagement with China. After the call, Carney described the discussion as positive and said both countries would resolve the issue after reassuring Trump that ownership would be shared by both sides. The bridge, named after legendary Canadian ice hockey player Gordie Howe, is expected to open in early 2026, pending final safety tests and approvals.
Over in Europe, where Estonia's foreign intelligence says Russia doesn't intend to launch an attack on any NATO country this year or the next, but is racing to rebuild its forces. Authorities say ammunition production is expanding so rapidly that Russia will be able to stockpile supplies for future wars while continuing to fight in Ukraine. Any Russian attack on Estonia would involve drones on land, in the air and at sea, simultaneously across Estonia's entire territory, according to intelligence service.
We know that Russia is planning to increase its military capabilities in the future. Which will increase military posture and disposition along Baltic, Finnish and Norwegian borders. At the same time, we cannot recognize any intention currently to attack any NATO country. But there is another part of this sentence, is that in order to keep that situation in the mid and long term, from the NATO perspective, we have to invest in our defense today, defense capabilities, also internal security. That's how we are able to manage and contain Russia also in the future. We see that Russian influence activities are on full speed. We know that Russia is very concerned about the so-called European rearmament, which they perceive as a future challenge. And we see that at least some of the activities Russia conducts, working with different political powers or parties, other groups which are willing to promote Russian interests and narratives, with the goal to slow down Europe in this regard, or to stop it.
As the Russia-Ukraine war nears its 4-year mark, attacks on energy infrastructure persist. Recent strikes targeted 2 sites in the west, as well as facilities in the Odessa, Kyiv and Dnipropetrovsk regions. Energy workers say they're determined to keep electricity flowing.
Ukrainian energy workers are clearing debris at a heavily damaged power facility after what they say was one of the most powerful Russian strikes on the site to date. They said teams are still removing rubble and cannot yet fully assess the condition of the equipment, noting it is too early to determine how critical the damage is.
We can compare the attacks because strikes have repeatedly happened during my shifts, with missiles, drones and combined attacks. This one was, one might say, more powerful. The charges were stronger. We felt it.
Nothing has changed. The Russians keep hammering us, violently attacking, destroying everything, that's all. First, when I was here, they hit and destroyed the roof. Then they finished off the equipment, everything. Nothing has changed. It is terrorism.
Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure began intensifying in October 2022, when Moscow launched a coordinated campaign targeting power plants, substations and heating facilities across the country. Since then, energy sites have been repeatedly struck by missiles, drones and combined attacks, with waves of bombardment increasing during winter months. Ukrainian authorities say the strikes have caused widespread blackouts, damaged generation capacity and left millions of households intermittently without electricity or heating, particularly during periods of freezing temperatures. In major cities, including Kyiv, emergency heating centres have been set up as repair crews work to stabilise supply. The latest attack comes despite previous diplomatic efforts, including US-backed pauses in strikes on energy targets, which Ukrainian officials say Russia has used to regroup and stockpile weapons rather than halt attacks. Authorities say restoration work continues, but full assessments of damage often take days due to unexploded debris and structural risks.
Anti-government protests in Albania turned violent on Tuesday evening in the capital, Tirana. Thousands demanded the resignation of Deputy Prime Minister Belinda Baluku over alleged corruption. The unrest highlights political tension since Baluku was indicted for allegedly interfering in public tenders, charges she denies. It also comes as prosecutors seek to lift her immunity in Parliament. The clashes have raised concerns about the country's stability and reform efforts. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to meet with US President Donald Trump in Washington today. The talks are set to focus on negotiations with Iran following indirect nuclear discussions between Iranian and US officials held in Muscat last week. Iranian officials have ruled out including the country's missile program in the talks and said Tehran is seeking recognition of its right to enrich uranium. Indonesia says it is preparing up to 8,000 soldiers for a possible deployment to Gaza, becoming the first country to move forward under the second phase of the US-brokered ceasefire agreement. Training has already begun with a focus on medical and engineering roles. The plan comes as part of a United Nations mandated international stabilization force and follows Indonesia's joining of the US-led Board of Peace. Meanwhile, medical sources say 5 Palestinians were killed in fresh violence on Tuesday. At least 581 Palestinians have been killed, with more than 1,550 injured in Israeli attacks in Gaza since the ceasefire began. China has launched its APEC 2026 host year as senior officials from the forum's 21 member economies meet in Guangzhou. The talks are setting priorities ahead of the APEC Leaders Summit later this year. For more on that, we go to Beijing and A News correspondent Maknoor Makdoum.
The first senior officials meeting of APEC China 2026 opened on Tuesday in Guangzhou, bringing together senior officials from the forum's 21 member economies, including the United States, Japan, Australia, and Southeast Asian nations, as China formally launched its host year. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi attended and addressed the opening session, where officials began discussions on deliverables and priorities ahead of the APEC economic leaders meeting scheduled for later this year. Chinese officials said that the agenda would focus on regional economic integration, open trade, the digital economy, and green development. The meeting comes against the backdrop of global economic uncertainty and rising geopolitical tensions, with APEC viewed as one of the few remaining platforms where major economies continue to engage in multilateral economic dialogue. China last hosted APEC in 2014 and is due to host the Leaders Summit again later this year. Manu Maktoum, A News, Beijing.
Over to a quick break now. When I return, I'll be joined by an in-studio guest. Stay with us. Welcome back and thank you for joining me this morning. Here are the top stories happening across the region. And first, we stay here in Baku, with US Vice President J.D. Vance has wrapped up his visit to Azerbaijan, signaling a stronger American push into the South Caucasus. The trip marks a new chapter in security and economic ties between Washington and Baku. Here's more.
The United States and Azerbaijan have signed a new strategic partnership agreement in Baku, marking a major step in Washington's efforts to expand its influence in the South Caucasus. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev signed the deal on Tuesday alongside US Vice President J.D. Vance, who is visiting the region. The agreement covers economic cooperation, defense ties, energy security, and artificial intelligence. President Aliyev said the partnership opens what he called an entirely new phase in relations between the two countries. He confirmed plans to deepen defense cooperation and continue joint efforts on counter-terrorism and energy security.
Connectivity, as I already mentioned, with TRIP will be another contribution to peace, development and cooperation in the region. We're also opening the chapter of cooperation in defense sales, which is also very promising, and of course AI data centers, which today is part of our bilateral agenda and where we already have preliminary results in interaction with the leading American companies.
Vice President Vance said that this partnership with Azerbaijan will lead to greater peace and prosperity in the region. He described the agreement as a sign of growing strategic cooperation.
There's a lot to announce. We could spend, I think, all day up here talking about some of the great things that are happening. We're going to ship some new boats to Azerbaijan to help you all with some of your territorial waters protection. We're proud to announce, and I believe I was one of the very first to fly along the new Trump Road for international peace and prosperity that will connect the two separate parts of Azerbaijan. And our hope is that that will build the kind of economic and natural resource and critical mineral cooperation that'll make it possible to really make this incredible peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia stick. I think that partnership, the partnership of the United States and Azerbaijan, will lead to greater peace and prosperity in the region. It will lead to more access to more markets for the workers of the United States of America, and it's just going to create a much better world where people are engaging in commerce with one another rather than fighting with one another.
The charter was first introduced during talks between Aliyev and US President Donald Trump in Washington last August. During that visit, Azerbaijan and Armenia reached a peace agreement aimed at ending decades of conflict.
Staying on this topic and US Vice President's tour of Armenia and then Azerbaijan, I'm now joined by Tural Ganjali, Member of Parliament from the Kankendi city. Welcome to the program this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
My first question really is about J.D. Vance and what this visit appears to tell us. It appears to signal a transition from a post-conflict diplomacy to prosperity-driven engagement. How would you assess the significance of this shift in US policy towards Azerbaijan and the wider South Caucasus?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a historic visit. It marks the new chapter in our relations. And this visit also is a testimony that the United States is now shifting its strategic foreign policy from transatlantic relations towards Indo-Pacific and towards South Caucasus as well. And Azerbaijan is a very important player, a key actor in this region. And the visit also was resulted by signing a charter of the strategic partnership between our countries, which is a significant step towards deepening and broadening our relations. This is historic, really, because we never had such kind of strategic document signed between our countries. And I think that it opens a new chapter. As President Aliyev phrased it, it is an entirely new phase in the history of our relations. And also it elevates our relations into a new level. And we are moving beyond the energy-only model towards military, political security cooperation, plus maritime defense, also AI, artificial intelligence paradigm. And it means that Azerbaijan will have, very important step and important contribution to the peace process also. I think that here also by connecting Azerbaijani peace initiatives and Azerbaijani proposals together with American commercial interests and also with high-tech security infrastructure model gives a win-win situation to everybody. It's not a zero-sum game. It is a win-win situation for Azerbaijan, for the United States, plus the regional countries, including Armenia.
Yes, definitely. And with the strategic partnership mechanisms now in place, what concrete outcomes do you think we should expect in the near to medium term from all of
very
this?
good question. The main outcome, the key takeaway of these relationships will be, first of all, the increase of bilateral relations, trade relations, with the opening of the Trump route for peace and prosperity. The regional cooperation will increase and will boost. And also additionally, I think that the very important issue is the so-called unfortunate section of 907 to the Freedom Support Act, unfortunate amendment, which still creates some obstacle before our relations. I think that with this historic visit, J.D. Vance's visit to Azerbaijan, it's about time that we get rid of this past legacy of our relations. And by the way, recently, U.S. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, she has introduced a bill to repeal this unfortunate section from the U.S. legislative, which means that we will have very important and we will have a very good opportunity to repeal this section once and for all. Also, Jackson-Vanik amendment, it was adopted during Soviet era against Soviet Union, but also it may include some countries, former Soviet countries. I think that this Jackson-Vanik amendment must be repealed once and for all. And additionally, we will, the outcome or the key takeaway would be US will provide Azerbaijan with high-tech, specially equipped naval vessels, which Azerbaijan will protect its territorial waters in the Caspian Sea. We have very important and very critical infrastructure on the Caspian Sea, and this infrastructure must be protected. And with the US assistance, the new high-tech naval vessels, I think that will contribute very tremendously to the naval security of the Caspian Sea, plus humanitarian assistance, US humanitarian assistance in demining the landmines from the formerly occupied territories of Azerbaijan. And also, President of Azerbaijan mentioned AI database centers and bases, because Azerbaijan will have surplus electricity, which will be directed to support US-led AI database centers.
That's really interesting, and there's so much that you can take out of that, you know, with this visit that JD Vance did to both Armenia and to Azerbaijan. And you mentioned the 903 agreement in regards to the kind of restrictions that was put on Azerbaijan. Because of the investment coming into the country from the US and a number of different Western partners, now do you think that's now going to be basically deleted and repealed because of this new partnership?
Yes, I think that it will be repealed because of this new partnership. By the way, very historic visit, first time in the history of our bilateral relations. The US-led Chamber of Commerce trade mission, including around 31 global US corporations, the CEOs, members of these corporations, their visit coincided with the visit of JD Vance to Azerbaijan. This is very historic and very important, and I think that we have also very important areas like Visa and MasterCard representatives were also included in the delegation. It means that digitalization, the transformation of banking system of Azerbaijan into a new reality. Also, we will be with the help and with the assistance of the US, of course, support. We would like to move beyond the only energy model towards alternative energy resources, but also maintaining the export and production of traditional fossil fuel resources. And very important thing is that now we are seeing the US foreign policy is being shifted and transformed towards South Caucasus. What we are seeing right now in the US foreign policy strategy is that the rules-based international order is being replaced and is being transformed towards national interest pragmatism. What United States is seeking is very strong sovereign nations with strong leaders to cooperate with. For example, United States now is criticizing the European Union because of their lack of leadership, because of the bureaucracy problems. But now we are seeing the emergence of Azerbaijan as a strong power center, which is very attractive for the United States, Republican Party and its current administration. I think that we have so many issues that we can cooperate and elaborate.
Yes, okay, and just let's focus now on the charter that was signed between President Ilham Aliyev and JD Vance, Vice President of the US. Now, that particular charter highlighted 5 main points, from security to economic investment. What does this all mean for Azerbaijan and practically implementing those particular 5 points?
Yes, these five points are really important for us. It includes maritime, again, defense, political, military security, also protection of civil and critical infrastructure, plus AI issues. And I think that in the first time in our history between our relations, this kind of strategic partnership will not only elaborate and will elevate our relations into a new level. By the way, it means that, for example, in the future, if new administration in the United States, for example, Democrats or Biden .2 or Kamala Harris, hypothetically speaking, they will not be able to repeal or to redirect and change this strategic partnership, because this signing of this strategic charter means that new chapter in the history of our relations will be eternal and will be, of course, it cemented already existing relations between our countries. And the most important thing is that it will tremendously contribute to the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And also trip route, we must not forget and we must not dismiss the trip route, which is important. It connects Azerbaijan, mainland Azerbaijan, with Nakhchivan region, and also eastward, we will see it will connect east with West, Asia with Europe, and also the US interests will also be represented here, and it is a very win-win situation for everybody. Again, not a zero-sum game.
Yes, yes. And just on that, that trip route, the Trump route to international peace and prosperity, something's changed in the frame matter between what was only between the US and Armenia when it came to the trip route. Now the trip language appears to be within the direct route in, well, the direct between US and Azerbaijan bilateral strategic document. How significant is that inclusion?
Yes, it's very significant because trip route, it is a positive development and boosting connection, regional connectivity, transport and communication links. By the way, we would like to wish good luck to Trip Development Company, which is now going to manage this corridor, which is very important. Initially, 74% of stake will belong to US, 26% of stake will belong to Armenia. But after 50 years, the stake of US percentage will decrease to 51%. But it means that, again, this route will continue to function and will bring all these countries together. It will contribute to regional cooperation and win-win situation again for everybody.
And as Azerbaijan positions itself as a bridge, as you mentioned, between Central Asia, the Caspian and global markets, what role do you think the US investment in regards to technology in the private sector engagement play in reinforcing long-term regional stability?
Yes, US involvement, US investment into the projects in the South Caucasus, including transport communication links, will increase the potential of our relations and will increase of course, it will positively affect the economic situation. And also with the opening of the borders between Armenia and Azerbaijan, US investments will not limit itself only to Armenia and Azerbaijan, because the flux of the economic investment, the goods, the transportation, communication links will positively affect the overall situation in the South Caucasus. That's why it is important that the signing of strategic partnership charter cements already peace initiatives and will defend South Caucasus from future threats or existential threats that may come from outside or from different regions, unfortunately. But we will be very vigilant with the partnership. We, of course, value and we respect our relations with our partners. That's why it's very important, again, to say that now US policy is shifting, transforming from being transatlantic traditional relations towards Indo-Pacific, towards Central Asia, towards South Caucasus, and US needs strong allies like Azerbaijan to achieve its strategic foreign policy. If I may add also that the United States is transforming itself and entering upon the new transatlantic relations towards the more pragmatic relations with the regional countries.
Yes, well, it seems very positive so far with regards to JD Vance's visit here, so we'll definitely be paying close attention. So thank you very much, Mr. Ganjali, for your insight.
My pleasure.
Right, well, a British engineering company is at the centre of a potential sanctions loophole. According to the Guardian newspaper, Signet Skimp is exporting high-tech machinery to a firm linked to Russia's military supply chain via Armenia. Quoted experts warn that this case highlights how Western technology can slip through indirect routes, fueling war in Ukraine despite strict controls. Here's more.
The UK government is facing pressure to review an export licence after concerns emerged that British technology could indirectly aid Russia's war in Ukraine. The Guardian reported that Signet Skimp, a company based in Cheshire, has been approved to export advanced machinery worth more than £4 million to Rydena LLC, a newly formed company in Armenia. The equipment produces carbon fibre pre-preg, a high-performance material used in civilian industries, but also critical to military systems such as drones, aircraft and missiles. The equipment is currently being assembled in the UK and could ship within weeks. The concern is Rydena's leadership. The company was set up in 2024 by former executives of Umatex, a Russian carbon fibre producer critical to Russia's military. Umatex is part of Rosatom, Russia's state nuclear corporation, and was sanctioned by the US in February 2023 and by the UK in May 2023. Rydena insists it works only in civilian sectors and has no Russian clients. But experts warn Armenia is a transit hub for Russian sanctions evasion. A news investigation, Shadow Trade, shows Armenian exports to Russia jump from $880 million pre-war to nearly $3 billion now, including phones, computers, machinery and microchips, components essential for Russia's weapons. Ukrainian forensic teams confirm these parts appear in missiles and drones. Sanctions experts say written end-user promises provide limited protection once technology leaves the UK. Signet says it followed all export rules and received government approval. The UK government has not commented on whether it checked Rydina's Umatex links. Liam Byrne, MP, chair of the House of Commons Business Committee, said there are red flags and questioned whether export controls are strong enough. The case highlights how Western technology continues to reach Russia indirectly, despite sanctions.
The World Defence Show continues in Riga, bringing together global military officials, industry leaders and government representatives. Among the exhibitors, Turkey's FNSS is presenting its latest armoured vehicle systems to regional security forces.
Now we are here to present or showcase our products for the Saudi land forces as well as the Saudi security forces. So here we are showcasing the 8x8, the latest configuration vehicle, which is the Pars Alpha. So this vehicle was selected by the Turkish Army by the program which is called the New Generation Armored Fighting Vehicle Program. And now we signed the contract and we have started the program, and we will be able to deliver both 8x8 and 6x6 configurations for this specific vehicle.
The European Union is planning a new wave of sanctions against Russia as Brussels changes the way it targets the network supporting Moscow's economy. The latest proposals widen the scope of turning the attention on financial and trade routes through third countries, including Central Asian ones. A News' Fariza Kalimzerna has more.
The European Union is preparing a new expansion of sanctions against Russia, and for the first time, Central Asia has emerged as a distinct focus. According to a draft document reviewed by Reuters, Brussels plans to activate its anti-circumvention mechanism against third countries, targeting financial and technological channels that facilitate transactions with Russia. Kyrgyzstan is at the center of the proposed measures. The European Union is considering adding two local banks, Kerimet Bank and Capital Bank of Central Asia, to its sanctions list. The document cites their role in providing crypto asset services to Russia. And if approved, the banks would be barred from conducting transactions with EU individuals and companies. Similar restrictions are proposed for banks in Laos and Tajikistan. The package goes beyond the financial sector. Brussels is also proposing a ban on exports to Kyrgyzstan of metal cutting machine tools and communications equipment, including devices used for voice, image and data transmission. This would mark the first formal use of the EU's anti-circumvention tool against a third country within the sanctions framework linked to Russia's war in Ukraine. The draft also briefly expands the geographic scope of restrictions. It refers to ports in Georgia and Indonesia that the EU says were used in operations involving Russian oil. If adopted, European companies could be prohibited from any dealings with these facilities. All measures are part of the EU's 20th sanctions package and still require unanimous approval from all EU member states to take effect. The European Commission President said the sanctions cover entire sectors and tighten control over maritime transport of Russian oil, replacing the previous G7 price cap. Fariza Kalimzerna, A News, Almaty.
Staying on this, Georgia's Prime Minister stressed he supports these new sanctions on Russia and will cooperate with the EU. A News' correspondent Nini Nikolashvili reports from Tbilisi.
Proposals under the European Union's 20th sanctions package over the war in Ukraine would for the first time extend EU restrictions to ports located in third countries. And the initial list includes Georgia's Ulavi oil terminal. According to documents reviewed by Reuters, the European Commission, together with the European External Action Service and the EU's diplomatic service, has proposed banning EU individuals and companies from conducting transactions with the ports of Kulawi in Georgia and Karimun in Indonesia. If approved, the move would mark a significant shift in EU sanctions policy aimed at cutting off logistical routes used to transport Russian oil beyond Russia's borders. The proposed measures reflect a broader tightening of sanctions enforcement as Brussels seeks to close loopholes that allow Moscow to continue exporting energy despite Western restrictions. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said that the package includes sector-wide measures and a shift away from the G7 oil price cap toward a full maritime services ban on Russian crude. For Georgia, the possible inclusion of the Kulawi port carries particular weight. The terminal is strategically important and recently handled shipments of Russian crude oil. Georgian authorities previously said that those deliveries complied with existing sanctions, noting that the vessels and companies involved were not under international restrictions at the time. Prime Minister Irakli Qorbaqidze has responded by stressing that Georgia strictly adheres to the sanctions regime and is open to cooperation with the European Union. He said that the government is ready for fact-based consultations, information sharing, and detailed discussions on Kulawi, emphasizing that the port's strategic importance to the country is crucial. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
It's now time for a break. When I come back, I have a full update on the latest headlines, plus a look at what's making the headlines on the front pages this morning. Stay with us. Good morning, you're watching Daybreak. If you're just joining me, I'm your host for this morning, taking you through the day's top stories. My name is Nadia Jani, and here are the headlines. Trump threatens Iran with something very tough if US demands are not met. At least 10 dead in mass shooting at school and home in Canada, authorities say. And US Vice President J.D. Vance and Azerbaijan President Ilham Aliyev signed strategic partnership during his visit to the South Caucasus. Now let's take a look at the story shaping the day across the globe, and we head first to CNN website where news broke just over 2.5 hours ago of at least 9 dead in mass shooting at school and home in Canada, police say. We know that actually it's now 10 because the suspect also has died from their injuries. Now, at least 9 people were shot during at a high school, it's been stated, and a residential property in the Canadian province of British Columbia. Now, that happened on Tuesday. Police responded to reports of an active shooter at the Tumbler Ridge Secondary School around 1:20 in the afternoon local time. Now, another person has died, being transported to a hospital, and the suspect, as I mentioned, was also found dead with what appears to be self-inflicted wounds, and that was also stated by the police there. Now, 2 victims have been airlifted to hospital with serious or life-threatening injuries. And if you can see this particular picture here, if we scroll all the way down, we'll see a map of Tumbler Ridge, which is actually a rural town of about 2,400 people at the base of Rocky Mountains in the West Canada area, about 680 kilometers. There we are with just that pinpoint there, that red stating exactly where this mass shooting took place. Now, just to also highlight, mass shootings are extremely rare in Canada. They have much stricter gun rules than the US does, but police are investigating. They believe that there's no ongoing threat to the public, but the Tumbler Ridge Secondary School has roughly 175 students from grade 7 to 12, according to the website. Now, police are investigating as to what actually led to the shooting, but as said, there's nothing in regards to a motive has been realised as yet. But we'll keep you updated throughout the course of the day as we get more information on this breaking news. Now we go to Deutsche Welle website, and it's the headline on here that's India tightens AI rules for social media platforms. Now, India has decided to tighten its rules labeling AI content. It will be mandatory for all platforms, including Instagram, TikTok and Facebook, to clearly label what the government is calling synthetically generated information. So the labels must be permanent, markings that cannot be suppressed or removed. So India actually wants to curb the online misuse of deepfakes and AI, which has actually been running rampant in the country for a while. India has around 1 billion internet users and a very large young population. So this makes it an important move for social media in this country. We know that a number of countries are doing a number of different things when it comes to social media. Europe is looking at under 15 ban. We know that Australia kicked this off in December with its under 16 ban for social media content, as well being banned for those aged 16 and under. So something that India is also trying to get a grasp with, especially when it comes to deep fakes and misinformation there. Right now, we head over to our next headline, which is on our A News website. Trump says second US carrier possible if Iran talks fail. So what we understand is that Trump is threatening Iran with a possible military strikes on issues ranging from nuclear enrichment to ballistic missiles. In his comments, he said that, from what we gather from an Israeli outlet, said that if no deal comes together with Iran, an aggressive option might also be the case. So we do know that Trump is thinking about sending a second aircraft carrier to the Middle East. There are a number of military missile vessels around the region, and it's something that critics say they fear such an attack could destabilize the region. Here on Al Jazeera, this is also a headline for them. Trump threatens Iran with something very tough if US demands are not met. We know that the start of this heightened pressure on Iran started in January when there were anti-government protests began, and Trump actually said that the country, the US military, is locked and loaded and ready to go if necessary because of how Iran was treating its protesters. Trump also compared Iran's situation with Venezuela as well. Well, we have more information and more detail in regards to this particular story in our report that's coming up. Take a look at this.
A second American aircraft carrier strike group could be sent to the Middle East for possible military action against Iran if negotiations fail. That's according to US President Donald Trump on Tuesday. In an interview with Axios, Trump explained that either the US would make a deal with Iran or it would have to take tougher action, similar to last year's 12-day war in June. This threat follows talks between the US and Iran on Tehran's nuclear program last Friday in Oman. However, Trump also said in an interview with Fox on Tuesday that he thinks that Iran wants to make a deal with the US on its nuclear and ballistic missile programs, but reiterated it would be foolish if they did not. Meanwhile, Iran maintains a positive diplomatic stance. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Baghai says that the nuclear talks had shown enough consensus to continue the diplomatic process.
The Muscat meeting, which was not a long session, was in fact a half-day meeting. From our perspective, it was aimed at assessing the seriousness of the other side and the potential course of the process. Accordingly, this meeting generally focused more on the broader picture.
Meanwhile, Iran's top security official, Ali Larijani, held talks in Oman on Tuesday, days after the first round.
From the beginning, we believe that war does not resolve matters between the two countries, and the regional disputes between Iran and the West must be resolved through dialogue. It was a mistake on the part of others to believe that they could resolve issues through the language of force. This was a negative point and led to many problems in the dialogue. We believe that the many problems in the region must be resolved through dialogue between both sides.
Larijani's visit to Oman comes as Iran and the US prepare for the next round of nuclear negotiations. Tehran has said it has halted enrichment activity since the strikes on facilities last year, and always said its nuclear program is solely for peaceful purposes.
A Russian attack has killed 4 people in a town west of Ukraine's second largest city of Kharkiv. That's according to the regional governor on Telegram. Strikes have also damaged energy infrastructure and left residents in the Kharkiv region without electricity. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Tuesday called for a faster military and local administrative response to ongoing energy disruptions. He expressed dissatisfaction with the pace in certain regions. Zelensky said that while repair crews and emergency services are working effectively, not all communities are resolving infrastructure problems on time.
This is a fundamental issue, and I urge local authorities and all services to constantly verify it. The same approach should apply to other cities and communities. Unfortunately, there are cases where full reports on problems are missing and much time is lost. Today, we reviewed such situations in Kiev, Okhtyrka, and Kryvyi Rih. Every community leader and responsible service must pay real attention to what is happening with buildings, networks, and the implementation of mandatory assistance decisions.
Anti-government protests in Albania turned violent on Tuesday evening in the capital, Tirana. Thousands demanded the resignation of Deputy Prime Minister Belinda Beluku over alleged corruption. The unrest highlights political tensions since Beluku was indicted for allegedly interfering in public tenders, charges she denies. It also comes as prosecutors seek to lift her immunity in Parliament. The clashes have raised concerns about the country's stability and reform efforts. At least 10 people, including the suspect, have been killed after a shooting in a school in the town of Tumbler Ridge in the western province of British Columbia. 6 people were found dead inside the secondary school. 2 more were found dead at a residence believed to be connected to the incident, and another person died on the way to hospital. Police say the suspected shooter, a woman, was found dead inside the school from self-inflicted injury. More than 25 people were injured. 2 were serious or life-threatening injuries. Authorities say investigators have identified the shooter but would not release a name, and that the suspect's motive remains unclear. Following threats by US President Donald Trump to bar the opening of a bridge connecting Canada with the US, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says the issue will be resolved after a phone call with Trump. Here's more.
US President Donald Trump talked with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney on the phone on Tuesday after Trump threatened to bar the new $4.7 billion bridge connecting Detroit and Windsor from opening. The Gordie Howe International Bridge links the Canadian province of Ontario with the US state of Michigan and was financed by Canada. But Trump argues the project unfairly favours Canada, saying US companies and materials played only a limited role in its construction, while Canada is expected to benefit significantly from American trade traffic.
I think the president was very clear and direct in his truth, John, but just to reiterate, the fact that Canada will control what crosses the Gordie Howe Bridge and owns the land on both sides is unacceptable to the president. It's also unacceptable that more of this bridge isn't being built with more American-made materials, even more so than what President Barack Obama committed to with the Canadians at the time, at the start of the project. He also believes that the U.S. should own at least half of the bridge, have shared authority over what passes across it, and participate in the economic benefits generated by its use.
The US president also tied the dispute to broader trade tensions, including Canadian tariffs on US dairy products and Canada's recent trade engagement with China. After the call, Carney described the discussion as positive and said both countries would resolve the issue after reassuring Trump that ownership would be shared by both sides. The bridge, named after legendary Canadian ice hockey player Gordie Howe, is expected to open in early 2026, pending final safety tests and approvals.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to meet US President Donald Trump in Washington today. The talks are set to focus on negotiations with Iran following indirect nuclear discussions between Iranian and US officials held in Muscat last week Friday. Iranian officials have ruled out including the country's missile program in the talks and said Tehran is seeking recognition of its right to enrich uranium. Indonesia says it is preparing up to 8,000 soldiers for possible deployment to Gaza, becoming the first country to move forward under the second phase of the US brokered ceasefire agreement. Training has already begun with a focus on medical and engineering roles. The plan comes as part of a United Nations mandated international stabilization force and follows Indonesia's joining of the US-led Board of Peace. Meanwhile, medical sources say 5 Palestinians were killed in fresh violence on Tuesday. At least 581 Palestinians have been killed, with more than 1,550 injured in Israeli attacks in Gaza since the ceasefire began. China has launched its APEC 2026 host year as senior officials from the forum's 21 member economies meet in Guangzhou. The talks are setting priorities ahead of the APEC Leaders Summit later this year. Staying on this topic and to discuss some of those initiatives that came out of the meeting, I'm now joined by political risk analyst Ross Feingold to unpack what was discussed. Welcome this morning. My first question.
Hi.
Hello. My first question, what is the overall significance of this meeting, of the APEC meeting that was held yesterday?
Like any country that has the chairmanship of an international organization or a treaty or a free trade agreement on a rotating basis, certainly it adds a lot of prestige and brings a lot of media attention to that country that is fulfilling that chairmanship role. Now, of course, one could say China doesn't really need that given its economic and political and increasingly its military strength. So in the bigger picture, being the chair of APEC and being the host of a series of meetings and taking the lead on the work areas of APEC. And keep in mind, APEC is not a free trade agreement. Its nature is to facilitate business, to deal with things like how to make it easier for goods or people to move across borders, such as improving customs procedures and things of that sort. But they're not about negotiating lower tariffs like a free trade bloc would. But anyway, being the chair this year means that China has to organize meetings about those topics at various levels of seniority. So again, one could say, well, why would China really need something that doesn't really make China any stronger than it actually is? But ultimately, at the end of a year of meetings of various officials that the host country or chair country will organize, they do have the big summit of APEC leaders. And all these leaders of the APEC members will come to China for a big meeting. Now, not everyone will show up. There's no guarantee that President Trump will show up because he went briefly to APEC last year and he's supposed to visit China in April of this year. So one thing to watch going forward with APEC up until the time they actually have the summit is, would Trump make a second trip to China if he does in fact visit in April? But again, being the host of the summit is a chance for the host country to shine on the world stage. And one more point, which is also very important for China, is given the United States policies under President Trump to be very skeptical of multilateral organizations. Trump has withdrawn from many, including the World Health Organization. He's a skeptic of multilateralism. This gives China a chance to tell the world, or specifically the members of APEC, we love multilateralism and we're going to do everything we can to ensure that that system of multilateral organizations and agreements continues to prosper.
Yes, no, definitely. There's a lot to unpack with especially US and China relations. But the theme for this year is building on Asia-Pacific community to prosper together. Why is that a main goal for 2026 coming up here?
A lot of that, frankly, is a response to President Trump's policies and President Trump's use of trade and specifically tariffs as a tool to achieve what he believes are the best goals for the United States and its relationships with other countries. And again, even though he uses the tariffs or the threat of higher tariffs as a tool, President Trump has shown he's willing to use that tool not just in the context of trade or trade deficits and whether or not the United States has a trade deficit with a specific trading partner, but he's willing to use it in other contexts and to achieve other foreign policy goals. So again, China is trying to give the message to countries in the region, which is China's backyard. Understandably, one just has to look at a map to see that. That China is going to say, yeah, we're going to take the lead on business and helping everybody in the region make money based on common understandings and rules and processes. And we're not trying to upset that. We're trying to encourage that as distinguished from the United States. That'll be China's message. Some countries might believe it. I think what the end result ultimately will be a lot of countries will still try to be best buddies with both China and the United States.
Right, and just speaking about the Asian countries in particular, there are a number of countries, Asian countries, that are having a rapidly growing age population and low fertility rates. How might this be an obstacle to their, mandate for joint economic growth when this is actually a major concern for a number of Asian countries?
That's a question that policymakers struggle with. I'm speaking from Taiwan, where the birth rate continues to fall very, very rapidly. South Korea, Japan, Singapore, China are all experiencing a similar problem. The ever increasing cost of housing or the cost of everyday goods doesn't help with that. So a lot of countries in the region have some very good economic numbers, including Taiwan, where I'm speaking from, where the outlook is pretty good in some places. But there's definitely issues of wealth inequality and a cost of living crisis, for lack of a better description, that we see in other parts of the world as well. But unfortunately, policymakers don't necessarily have any quick fixes for that.
Yes, it's something that's going to be ongoing, and I'm sure something that they are looking into. The next the focus was AI in regards to that and the part that it's playing in relation to innovation within the whole aspect of APEC and the countries that will be joining the later meeting in the year. What do you think can be seen in the field, especially with US backing for the NVIDIA chips as well? Do we feel that AI will have quite a strong, significant topic and place in this year within APEC?
Certainly, policymakers in this part of the world are looking at a lot of different AI issues. One is kind of the obvious one, which has to do with the manufacturing side. And here in Taiwan, it's the leader in manufacturing the most advanced semiconductor chips that are used in AI applications or in data centers. But other countries want to get more of that manufacturing to occur in their countries as well, whether that's Japan, South Korea. China, of course, is investing an enormous amount of money, even though they still lag behind as far as what their technical capabilities are to manufacture the most advanced chips, but they'll catch up eventually. It's a question of time and money, but it will take time and a lot of money, a huge amount of investment to reach that point. But besides the manufacturing side or the rules governing the trade in advanced semiconductor chips, the other issues that will confront policymakers, including APEC member economies, is the regulation of AI. And countries are racing to come up with laws and regulations for that as well. But like so many things with technology seems to race ahead at a speed much faster than policymakers, lawmakers could catch up. But I think we'll hear more and more about how to regulate the use of AI, whether that's in healthcare or other types of industries. But we were just talking about rapidly aging population. So certainly countries are in this part of the world will be looking at how to use AI in healthcare, for example, but even just in day-to-day advertising and our use of the internet, e-commerce. There certainly is a lot more AI being used in this part of the world, but again, policymakers are trying to catch up with how to regulate it. So I would expect that also to be a focus going forward. But again, keep in mind that APEC not being, it's not the WTO, it's not a trade agreement. So all they could do is talk about interesting ideas. It doesn't mean that APEC will be a platform for actually implementing anything.
Yes, you also mentioned the meeting with Xi Jinping and Trump happening in April. And I just wanted to kind of focus in on that just because of how China is positioning itself, as you mentioned, a multilateral kind of partner with a number of other countries, and the US taking a very different turn. How might ties between the two countries impact their foreign policy and when it comes to dealing with the West and the East?
Well, first, I would encourage the audience to keep in mind that so much could happen that affects U.S.-China relations in the next few weeks that we shouldn't be certain that this trip will occur until President Trump actually lands in China. There's just too many variables, whether it's Taiwan or human rights issues or trade disputes. So much could happen that could cause the trip to be canceled. So I think just out of an abundance of caution, we should keep that in mind. But at the moment, President Trump continues to say nice things about Xi Jinping. He had the call last week, and President Trump said, my call with Xi Jinping was excellent. President Trump put a very, very positive spin on that. But in more recent days, President Trump has been very critical of Canada again, and specifically referred to Canada making trade deals with China. So countries that need to maintain a positive relationship with the United States have to keep in mind that even when President Trump says nice things about his personal relationship with Xi Jinping, and even though President Trump is willing or wants to sell more to China, he wants to sell more soybeans to China, it appears that President Trump and his team are discouraging countries that are close to the United States from in turn being too close to China. And certainly President Trump is, and we see this with his criticism of Canada's electric vehicle agreement to allow more EVs from China into Canada. President Trump is basically sending the message, sell to China is okay. But if you're going to let China come and sell to you or operate infrastructure in your country, such as the Panama Canal, which was operated by a Hong Kong company until recently, then the United States under President Trump is going to have a very strong opinion on that, and they're putting countries about this on notice. So it's a very clear distinction, actually, although at first glance it might not be so clear. But again, President Trump seems to be saying, you could sell to China. I want America to sell to China, but that's the line. And you shouldn't let China sell too much to you or run your infrastructure.
Yes, no, definitely. Well, we'll definitely wait to see whether or not that meeting actually takes place in April, as all eyes will be on those two leaders and what will come out of that. So thank you very much, Mr. Feingold, for your outtakes in regards to the APEC meeting 2026.
Thank you.
Now we head over to Georgia, and Georgia's Prime Minister has stressed that he supports sanctions held by the EU on Russia and will cooperate with all that is required. Our A News correspondent Nini Nikolashvili reports from Tbilisi.
Proposals under the European Union's 20th sanctions package over the war in Ukraine would for the first time extend EU restrictions to ports located in third countries. And the initial list includes Georgia's Ulavi oil terminal. According to documents reviewed by Reuters, the European Commission, together with the European External Action Service and the EU's diplomatic service, has proposed banning EU individuals and companies from conducting transactions with the ports of Kulawi in Georgia and Karimun in Indonesia. If approved, the move would mark a significant shift in EU sanctions policy aimed at cutting off logistical routes used to transport Russian oil beyond Russia's borders. The proposed measures reflect a broader tightening of sanctions enforcement as Brussels seeks to close loopholes that allow Moscow to continue exporting energy despite Western restrictions. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said that the package includes sector-wide measures and a shift away from the G7 oil price cap toward a full maritime services ban on Russian crude. For Georgia, the possible inclusion of the Kulawi port carries particular weight. The terminal is strategically important and recently handled shipments of Russian crude oil. Georgian authorities previously said that those deliveries complied with existing sanctions, noting that the vessels and companies involved were not under international restrictions at the time. Prime Minister Irakli Qorbakidze has responded by stressing that Georgia strictly adheres to the sanctions regime and is open to cooperation with the European Union. He said that the government is ready for fact-based consultations, information sharing, and detailed discussions on Kulawi, emphasizing that the port's strategic importance to the country is crucial. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
A major focus at the World Defence Show is localization under Saudi Arabia's vision for 2030. Havlasan, a Turkish IT company, says it's expanding partnerships with local companies to develop training, simulation and modernization programs.
And Saudi market is also growing, and young people, young engineers here, very eager to make localization within the vision of 2030 program. That's why we have signed some MOUs within mid-size, newly built companies, especially for EW training ranges and shooting range program, and also some simulation programs. We want to develop simulation software, some modernization of the old equipments here.
You're watching Daybreak on A News. Stay with us after this short break. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani. Now we head over to Washington, where US Vice President J.D. Vance has wrapped up his visit to Azerbaijan, signaling a stronger American push into the South Caucasus. The trip marks a new chapter in security and economic ties between Washington and Baku. Our correspondent in Washington brings us more.
The historic peace accord between Azerbaijan and Armenia was the catalyst for Vice President J.D. Vance's trip to the South Caucasus, where he concluded the visit signing a strategic partnership charter between the United States and Azerbaijan, strengthening bilateral relations and security cooperation between the two countries. J.D. Vance called Azerbaijan a key U.S. ally that is playing an important role in establishing the Trump route for international peace and prosperity. That's a trade, logistics, and energy hub that will connect Azerbaijan to its exclave Nakhchivan through southern Armenia. The vice president emphasized that the shared prosperity and cultural connections that will be made possible by the Trump route will ensure that the peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia is a lasting one. The strategic partnership charter between the United States and Azerbaijan is expected to open up billions of dollars in investments in the Middle Corridor trade route, energy security, artificial intelligence, and defense cooperation. Vice President Vance highlighted the cooperation between the United States and Azerbaijani soldiers during the war against terror in Afghanistan. He stated that Azerbaijani forces earned a reputation as being some of the toughest and fiercest troops anywhere in the world. During a joint press conference with President Aliyev, Vice President Vance also concluded that the mutual cooperation with Azerbaijan and the new peace in the region will, in his words, quote, create prosperity where once there was only fighting and war. Amubi Shabander, A News, Washington.
Turning to Europe, and migration is again at the centre of its political debate. European Union lawmakers backed tougher asylum rules aimed at speeding up deportations and tightening control over the bloc's borders. Supporters say the changes are necessary to manage migratory flows more effectively, while critics warn they could undermine fundamental rights. Our correspondent Anita Sharma has more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe and a major step toward tougher asylum rules. EU lawmakers back changes designed to speed up returns of rejected applicants and tighten control over migratory flows. The European Parliament's vote updates the bloc's asylum procedures regulation and creates a new law on migrant returns, but the package still needs final sign-off from the EU's 27 governments. The package allows EU states to fast-track asylum rejections and deportations by creating an EU-wide list of so-called safe countries where migrants can be sent back, including Egypt and Tunisia. Under the new rules, an asylum application can be refused if the person could have obtained protection in a country the EU deems safe, tightening eligibility for protection inside the bloc. Lawmakers also backed common EU standards on returns, including new obligations for people given a return order. Migrants who refuse to leave voluntarily could face prison terms for non-cooperation, and member states will be allowed to set up so-called return hubs outside EU territory that would mirror Italy's controversial offshoring deal with Albania. The measures form part of the EU's broader migration pact from 2023 and is due to be fully implemented by June. Supporters say the tougher approach is needed after more than 1 million people, mainly from Syria, arrived from 2015 to 2016, fueling voter anger and boosting nationalist parties across the continent. But humanitarian groups, plus Green and left-wing lawmakers warn the reforms risk breaching the 1951 Refugee Convention and dehumanizing EU migration policy by sending vulnerable people back to countries where they may not be safe. Overall, the EU vote underscores just how central migration has become to Europe's political battles and how far EU governments are now willing to go to speed up deportations and tighten control at their borders. Whether these tougher rules deliver order without eroding fundamental rights is a test that will play out in the months and years ahead. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Turning to the Winter Games now, and yesterday I spoke about the Olympic ring tattoos a lot of athletes are sporting, the banned helmets and injuries that a number of athletes have suffered. But things are definitely turning up a notch as we head over to the kitchen now, and pizza and pasta dishes seem to be a clear winner with the athletes, with more than 2,000 athletes from 92 different countries have meals served around the clock. Staff say the Italian-style carbohydrate offering seems to be a hit, and with one group in particular. Let's take a listen.
Meals in the villages are served according to Olympic regulations, meaning that food is available 24 hours a day. There are, of course, specific times for the 3 main meals, which are very long, especially in the Milan village. This is actually an effort to keep the players happy. For example, the hockey players, who are probably the ones who eat the most food and eat the most frequently. So we commend ourselves for this very reason.
So it was those hockey players that seemed to be eating the majority of the pasta and pizza, but hey, they were able to burn it off. Now, we need to go to something a little less tasty, but still staying on the Winter Games. Norwegian skier Sturla Holm Lagride, who won a bronze medal in the men's 20-kilometer biathlon, made a very heartfelt confession to a Norwegian broadcaster, admitting his infidelity. Let's take a look.
But it was the choice I made. We make different choices during our life, and that's how you make life, basically. So today I made the choice to tell the world what I did, so maybe there's a chance that she will see what she really means to me, and maybe not, but I don't want to think I didn't try everything to get her back.
to pizza, pasta, and now a confession. The Winter Games are definitely full of surprises. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for joining me this morning. Tomorrow, I'll be back bringing you a number of stories that is leveling up the morning for tomorrow. Take care and stay with us.